Pentagon chief says U.S. troops in Afghanistan to be redeployed against China, December 19th, 2019. A drawdown of U.S. troops from Washington's 18-year war in Afghanistan will facilitate their redeployment to the Asia-Pacific region as part of the U.S. military buildup against China, U.S. Defense Secretary Mark Esper told reporters this week. The remark came amid reports that some 40,000 of the roughly 13,000 U.S. troops now deployed in the war-ravaged country may be pulled out within weeks. During his unannounced and lightning trip in and out of the heavily fortified U.S. Bagram Air Base north of Kabul on Thanksgiving, Trump said that he was considering cutting the number of troops in Afghanistan, quote-unquote, very substantially. Esper explained the geostrategic calculations underlying such a withdrawal, which have nothing to do with Trump's demagogy about ending Washington's, quote, endless wars, end quote. Quote, I would like to go down to a lower number because I want to either bring those troops home, end quote, he said, or order them, quote, redeployed to the Indo-Pacific to face off our greatest challenge in terms of the great power competition, that's vis-a-vis China, end quote. The withdrawal of 40,000 U.S. personnel would bring the total U.S. troop strength back to the level that Trump inherited from the Obama administration, which had brought down the number to 8,600. Trump's escalation of the U.S. intervention in August 2017 came in response to demands from his then Defense Secretary James Mattis and over the previous objections of his fired chief political strategist, the extreme right-wing Stephen Bannon, who had opposed any escalation in the Middle East as a diversion from the U.S.-China conflict. Responding to Pentagon reporters while flying back from a ceremony in Belgium marking the 75th anniversary of the Battle of the Bulge, Esper said that while he believed, quote, the best solution for Afghanistan is a political agreement, end quote, the troop withdrawal could be accomplished, quote, with or without an agreement, end quote. The Trump administration resumed negotiations with the Taliban on December 7th in the Gulf oil sheikhdom of Qatar. Previous talks were abruptly broken off in September on the very eve of a scheduled signing of a peace deal at Camp David, the U.S. presidential retreat in Maryland. Ostensibly, Trump called off the deal because of an attack in Afghanistan that took the life of an American soldier. In reality, the White House backed out in the face of what it anticipated would be criticism, particularly from Democrats, over meeting with the Taliban at Camp David on the eve of the anniversary of the September 11th, 2001 attacks, which were used in the pretext for the U.S. invasion of Afghanistan. The Taliban has made its acceptance of a peace agreement with Washington conditional on the complete withdrawal of U.S. and other foreign troops from Afghanistan. A drawdown of 4,000 troops, according to Esper, would still allow the U.S. military to carry out its principal objectives, search and kill missions by U.S. Special Forces, and the continuation of the, quote, train, advise, and assist, end quote, operation with the Afghan security forces. The massive $738 billion U.S. military spending bill, the largest in history, which was approved with the overwhelming support of both parties in the U.S. House and Senate, includes $4.5 billion for the training and support of the security forces of the U.S.-backed regime in Kabul. The Pentagon strategy is to back these forces with the increasing use of American airstrikes in an attempt to stave off the Taliban, which controls the largest areas of the country since the regime it headed was overthrown by the U.S. invasion 18 years ago. The escalating U.S. bombing campaign is one of the main factors in driving up civilian casualties to the highest numbers seen since the UN Afghanistan mission began keeping figures. Last year, 3,804 Afghan civilians were killed in the war. U.S. airstrikes killed 579 civilians in the first 10 months this year, a third more than 2018. According to UNICEF, 631 children were killed and another 1,830 wounded in military attacks in just the first 9 months of this year. This marked an 11% increase over 2018. Esper's statement about drawing down UN forces from Afghanistan and turning them against China comes barely a week after the Washington Post published the, quote, Afghanistan Papers, end quote, consisting of interviews with hundreds of US military commanders and civilian officials that provided a damning indictment of the criminality and abject failure of a nearly 2-decade-old imperialist intervention that was launched and continued based on lies. And when that Afghanistan Papers post from the Washington Post was released, I recall saying at the time, I bet they're actually putting that out to change public opinion, because the Washington Post basically is CIA controlled. It's run by Amazon's Jeff Bezos. It did a huge contract of about $800 million with the CIA a year or so ago. So it's actually connected heavily with the CIA. And I was thinking the Washington Post wouldn't put out anything that's actually real. They only really put out propaganda most of the time. So I assumed that when they released, when they did an article about the Afghanistan Papers, that was intentional to actually change public opinion against maybe the amount of troops that are in Afghanistan, so that then they can be deployed to probably either do something against Russia or China. That was my immediate thought. It's terrible that one ends up becoming so skeptical when mainstream media actually put out something that is what appears to be exposing war crimes or exposing war problems with the military-industrial complex. That I immediately jumped to, I wonder what they're going to do. What are they trying to get the public to think this time? That's very sad. While the Pentagon has dismissed this devastating exposure, it is clear that the U.S. military and intelligence apparatus and the ruling establishment in Washington want to bring an end to the U.S. intervention. It has, however, no basis for believing that the corrupt and increasingly isolated Afghan government and security forces, described by one of those interviewed in the Afghanistan Papers as the, quote, bottom of the barrel, end quote, with 1/3 of them consisting of, quote, drug addicts or Taliban, end quote, have any ability to remain in power without U.S. armed support. While Washington continues to wage its bloody 18-year-long war in Afghanistan and is escalating its military threats against Iran, the thrust of U.S. strategy and of the massive new military spending bill is the preparation of war with what the U.S. National Security Strategy, released in 2017, described as, quote, revisionist powers, end quote, and, quote, hostile competitors, end quote, that were challenging, quote, American power, influence, and interest, attempting to erode American security and prosperity, end quote, that is, Russia and China. Even as Esper talks about redeploying U.S. troops from Afghanistan to the Indo-Pacific in continuity with the Obama administration's, quote, pivot to Asia, end quote, the Pentagon is engaged in feverish preparations for the most massive U.S. military exercises aimed against Russia since the height of the Cold War. Some 20,000 U.S.-based troops are set to begin deploying to Europe in February, joining more than 9,000 already on the continent for the, quote, Defender Europe 20, end quote, war games that will bring the American soldiers together with 13,000 pieces of equipment, including battle tanks and artillery, to within striking distance of Russia's borders. General Jeffrey Kramer, who was in charge of the exercise, described it as, quote, the biggest thing since Reforger, end quote, the maneuvers that were carried out between 1967 and 1988 against the Soviet Union. So anyway, that is from the World Socialist website, published by the International Committee on the Fourth International, ICFI, by Bill Van Auken. Anyway, that's when I read that, I just thought, of course they are. I mean, anyway, so thanks for watching. My name's Trish Roberts, and please check out Eyes Left podcast. They did a response about the Afghanistan Papers. That's by Mike Preisner, and Spencer Rapone, who are both vets from the Afghanistan and Iraq wars, and they have very interesting things to say about the Afghanistan papers. So check them out at Eyes Left Podcast on SoundCloud and other platforms, audio platforms. So thanks for watching. My name is Trish Roberts. You're watching Faint Signals from Vega. Please click the like button if you like the content. Hit the notifications bell, otherwise you won't receive notifications when I drop a video. And please subscribe if you haven't already. So thanks for watching. Till next time. Bye for now.